What's going on, guys? Nameless here, and I'm back for another video. You guys loved the last video, just talking about the launch weekend and my expectations for all the teams coming into it. Now that we've had a week and we have some results, we're going to talk about some of these teams with more context now. And before we get into all of that, I want to talk about the league as a whole and kind of what launch weekend was like from my perspective. Obviously, I live in Columbus and I commute to the studio where we do the live broadcast. The broadcast team put together some really cool assets, some new segments, and innovated for this year. Hope they continue to innovate and bring new things. And I really loved it. I think the halftime segment was great. The drawing conclusion segment, and also the burgers and fries, and just some of the fun new assets they brought to the show. I think it was refreshing and we had a lot of fun with it. And you guys seem to love it, man. If you guys have any ideas, leave comments and we'll look at those and pass them along if they're good. We got Puckett thinking of some cool little fun new ideas as well for the show, which we'll try to sprinkle in just to have a little bit more fun. But I think it was great. And aside from that, the gameplay, awesome. We had a lot of game fives. We had some pretty epic maps that came down to the wire, thinking about that Thieves and Faze game. But yeah, I think we're in for a really good year, guys, especially when we get some new maps. This game is a lot of fun. And a lot of the teams that people expect to be really, really bad, actually surprisingly pretty good. I think there's a lot of parity in the game right now. Obviously, it's early and teams will get better as the season goes and sort of separate themselves. But as it stands right now, like with the way this game plays, we're seeing some pretty close maps and close series, and I expect that to continue. There's really only one or two teams that have separated themselves, like for real at this point in time, but that'll change as we get closer to the major and we get through these minor tournaments and maps start to come in and out. You guys get where I'm going with this. But yeah, I had a really fun time. We had a bunch of new watch parties as well. Gataga and the Heretics guys coming in and doing some watch parties. I'm sure they had a blast and the viewership was phenomenal. So seems like the league's doing great. Black Ops 6 is doing great, and let's hope for more of that, because more of that means Call of Duty will get bigger and better, at least Call of Duty esports. All right, now let's talk about some of these teams. The last video, we did like our predictions and our thoughts for a lot of the teams. I will say, not to pat myself on the back, I was pretty accurate with a lot of my predictions for some of these teams and how I thought that they would perform, things I liked about them. Anyways, regardless, I left one team out of that video, and a lot of you guys are asking why. Apparently you guys don't read the comments, but I left in the comment that there was one team that I wanted to devote more time to, and that is the Toronto Ultra. And there's a reason why. Aside from the super teams and the guys just spent like a ton of money like LA Thieves on their roster, I thought Toronto Ultra made the best changes in the offseason. And here's why. Beans coming in, a lot of people, kind of wrote him off because of the stint with Boston last year. At a point in time, he was like top 2 with Scrap in terms of AR's damage per respawn. I felt like he could fill that role pretty perfectly for them. And I think Beans is as good, if not a better search and destroy player, just raw search like situationals, than Scrap. I think Scrap's a better player than Beans by a pretty wide margin in terms of intensity, rise to the occasion in big matches, but like just tit for tat, player for player, like Beans is a very similar player to Scrap, point blank period. And I think it kind of proved it over this weekend. There were 2 matches they had, like they went up against Faze, it was a 3-1, and their second match, who did they play? They played the Surge, and it was 3-2 game 5 round 11, where it was a 3v3 and they needed a big kill and a retake on protocol, and it's Beans who gets the first kill for the retake. Like making the massive impact search and destroy plays, bringing the energy is just exactly what you need. And then you got Joe Deceives coming in as an SMG. We don't talk about him in the same light as we talk about some of the other god SMGs because they've won championships, right? And with Joe Deceives though, he had a more natural upbringing into Call of Duty. He had to come into a pro team, go back to challengers, come back into a pro team, and then he gets top 4 at champs, top 2 at EWC, so proves he can do it on LAN, and was lighting it up. Not surrounded by renowned players, not surrounded by championship players, did it with the people around him who were all trying to make it and climb their way up the ranks. And Joe Deceives at this point in time is one of the best SMGs in the world. You put him alongside Insight and Kleenex, he's going to learn a ton. I think they've had really good practice up until this point. I think they're well-rounded and good on every level. Kleenex looks like he is better than ever. And if you think back to the Cold War year, Kleenex was unbelievable in that game. He's great at Treyarch titles. So I thought Toronto Ultra made it out great in terms of filling the roles that they needed and identifying like the issues that they had. Because if you think back last year, what was their biggest struggle? It was search and destroy. When they won the first major and they dominated in the first split, guys, they were very, very good at like a couple of search maps. Skid Row S&D. They were running through people 6-0. That map gets removed from the map pool. That was one of my biggest criticisms of them last year, is they didn't politic well. They let maps get removed that they were very good at. things of that nature. You have to do that as a pro team. It's just a part of the gig. They let that get removed, and there's like terminal S&D. So like they weren't a great search team. They just had like maps that they were very good at, and in certain metas it allowed them to obviously go on win a championship. But this year they identified that as an issue last year, and they bring in 2 great search players, Beans and Joe Deceivs, both known for their S&D. So that is going to get better, and then they can fill the roles that they need in the respawns, which leads to a 2-0 start where they beat Atlanta Faze and they beat Surge, who a lot would consider a top 8 team, who are also good in Surge in their own right. So shout out to Toronto. I love that roster change. Can't wait to go to Madrid. I think that organization did a great job, but we're going to keep it moving before this video gets to be way too long. We're going to talk about some of the other teams that really impressed me throughout the weekend. I would say the Carolina Royal Ravens, another team people did not think was going to be good. Slasher looks like he's in prime form. This is a team that we talked about in the last video, going to be good at search and destroy. They just have to make sure they commit to this roster and allow them to flourish and continue to improve. But the respawn at this point, I mean, 4-0 in hardpoint for the Carolina Royal Ravens, dominating teams. Slasher looks absolutely unbelievable. The 2 matches that they had, they beat Vegas Falcons, got a little bit tight in that first match jitters, and then they played the Gentlemates, who people thought would be very good. Beat them in both hard points. Slasher lighting it up once again. TJ Halley with some massive plays on rotation. In terms of fundamentals, they played pretty good, like right up there with the best. Like if I'm talking strictly hardpoint, like them and Thieves to me look like 2 of the better hardpoint teams throughout the weekend. Just how they played it, everybody was making the right plays and things were working out for them. So Carolina now 2-0, find themselves in a spot where they could get a winner's bracket spot, and that would be very exciting for these guys, because I think in a bracket format they're going to be pretty reliable if their HP looks like this. You give them a couple chances, you know, they lose when they go to losers, like they're going to be good on every level. So I think as long as they get that winner's bracket spot, give themselves that extra life, this is a team that could make a dark horse run come Madrid time. Another team that played phenomenal this weekend, the LA Thieves. They are going to be so tough to deal with. This team is absolutely ridiculous. They're running through people. They're so egotistical, and you could see it in their gameplay. And typically that is a good thing in Call of Duty, when you're just ego challenging everybody and you have the gun skill to back it up. On top of that, the brains. Like there was some plays that I broke down in the Telestrator segment where it's like the layering is perfect. And for those of you who don't know what layering is, just like pushing out and trying to get to the end game setup. What we call it on every hill is there's like an end game setup that you want to get into. They're doing it on a consistent basis, like off the rip, like winning all their gunfights, getting to the end game setup and just smoking you. I mean, go back and watch like the rewind that they had. There were some beautiful moments throughout that. And then rewind in the second match, like Atlanta Faze just got their guns hot and Thieves started to get a little bit overwhelmed, maybe challenging a little bit too much. But regardless of that, they were thrashing Atlanta in the first map, like destroyed them. But either way, they end up getting it done all the way into a game 5 where they really had the lock in. So they show that they have the resilience, they have the tenacity to be able to close out a series even when it gets murky. And then the series versus Cloud9 was just a straight dominant ass beating. I mean, they beat them like 500 to 210 total points in the hard points. LA Thieves are going to be a top 4 team all year long, top 3 team all year long. They're going to win championships. Their biggest enemy just might be themselves, right? They're going to have to make sure that they stay composed and they continue to do what they did versus Faze. Series gets murky because it will happen throughout the season. You're going to still have to lock in and close things out. Love what I saw from them though. They look like team to beat. Optic Texas, they're really bad in opening matches. I don't know exactly what the stat is, like 0-4 or something like that in opening matches in the last 4 years. Something like that. Don't quote me, but it's pretty bad. The loser opening match, Search and Destroy, looks absolutely abysmal. Something to keep your eye on. I said that in the last video. Like they just get lazy and they play way too individual sometimes. Don't focus on the objective or on the offensive rounds. Well, first series, they lose to Boston. Very concerning. But then what happens? The next series, Shotzi turns into Shotzi and starts going berserk. I mean, I think he had the best individual performance throughout the weekend, despite the first loss. He was hard carrying the hell out of them in the first match versus Boston. And then the second match, he just went crazy once again. Like the guy's unreal. He plays so aggressive. In terms of SMGs, like you have to be active in this game, especially in hardpoint. You have to be pushing up cuts back and you have to have a keen spawn awareness. And if you need to learn, that's the guy you want to watch. He has this game down pat. He knows every single spawn, knows how to manipulate them, and he is going to be the guy that gets them out of these tough situations. Obviously, Pred's going to have to catch up to Shotzi's knowledge, I think, at this point in time. Haven't seen the massive pop-off games from Pred just yet, but those are coming. And Kenny will grow as the season goes along. He's typically a middle to late bloomer in these Call of Duty titles. He starts to fry as the year goes on. But yeah, Optic Texas look good. I wouldn't be too worried if I was an Optic fan. I think they're going to be just like they were last year. If not better, they're going to be one of the teams to beat. Moving on, Surge. I like this roster. Definitely built within Rambo's image. How they performed throughout this weekend, I thought it was pretty good. You go to a couple of game 5s, you lose one and you win one. That's going to be these guys all year long. They're going to be a game 5 team, search and destroy roster. They're going to have to close these things out. Obviously in the second one, you let 04 get comfortable, going to be flanking, making some big plays against the Heretics, got behind them and closes the game out for them. They're going to have to somehow find some more slaying power in the HPs. They seem like on the protocol, on the hard point that we saw, like bottom computers both times, they had no idea how to hit that hill. They need to pull out more SMGs, need to get more active. Maybe a booster pulls out an SMG on that hill. We saw Beans doing it for Toronto, but they lost like 120 seconds on that hill on both rotations. So something really concerning for them. They're gonna have to figure that out. Either just don't play that map, or try to figure out what you're gonna do, how you're gonna approach it, because that hill's everything on that map. And for Surge, they just didn't have a good plan on how to attack it. But yeah, the slaying power in the HP is definitely a concern for me as it stands right now. But if they can keep on winning their search and destroys, they can be a top 6, top 8 team. But 1-1, still need to learn a little bit more about Surge. They left a lot to be desired. Moving on to another team, the Minnesota Rocker. I thought that they had a great weekend. They were in the jaws of defeat versus Boston. They ended up clutching up. I mean, it's just miracle plays, right? Like, it's gonna happen in Call of Duty. Estrio, I think for this roster, everything looks good in search and destroy. Paul X, absolute W. They hit on that. Picking him up was a great decision for the search and destroys. Estrio has to be better. He's the guy who underperformed for me throughout this week. For them to be exactly where they want to be, they need Estrio to be that guy, and he did not have a good weekend. He had a couple of like decent plays here and there, like he pinched Lion on Vault for like a huge play at the end of the hard point, but he's got to be a consistent slayer for them. As these teams start to improve and start to get better and learn and get a more keen awareness of these spawns and getting into their setups, like Estrio's gonna have to be slaying in order to get out of these tough situations, right? You're not gonna make miracles happen like you did at the end of the Vault versus Boston every single series. So Estrio is the guy that needs to improve for them to get to the point that they want to be at. Gentlemates, they got to make their kills count. I mean, the first map we saw from them, I think it was versus Minnesota, like they ended up losing that map and they outslayed them by like 10, 12 kills. Like, you have to be able to make your kills count. That's obviously 1. 2, search and destroy in this game is different than other games. Like, you're gonna have to play a little bit more team oriented around each other. There were a couple rounds you saw Kismet like try to do what he was doing the last couple years, where you push up, play on an island, and like catch a guy off guard, then get away with your life. Like, no, you're just gonna get banged out immediately in this game, especially like when a player's dead and you're in spectator, you can hear so loud. So like, you're just gonna get sound horde. They were like pushing up, then backing up as a unit. I vividly remember on like the rewind S&D, and the Kismet just gets caught by like 4 people wrapping back together. It's partly like map design, but also partly like omni movement, just like moving around together. Something they're gonna have to keep an eye out for. Like, you're not gonna be able to play the exact same way. And also, like, he doesn't have Hydra with him, so I'm sure the dynamics off like a little bit, just like situationals. Like, Linz is a different player. Linz had a good weekend though. Individually, like, the guys played good. They're gonna have to adjust their play style to what is Black Ops 6. I think they'll be fine, but right now they're definitely in trouble in terms of making the winners bracket, because there are 2 losses. If you look at it, they lost to Minnesota Rocker and then they lost to the Carolina Royal Ravens. They're gonna play some top teams. They're gonna probably have like an Optic or Thieves at some point in there, maybe a Faze, right? So you're gonna be in trouble, right? Like, you're already 0-2. You're risking going into the losers bracket, which is just not ideal. So for Gentlemates, a very bad start. I have faith in them. Do not panic yet, but yeah, gonna be concerning. Moving on, let's talk about the Falcons. Kicks, super impressive throughout this weekend. He like set a record for the first rookie ever to have over a 1.2 in each individual series of his first 2 series. So shout out to him. They gotta learn how to close out these games. I think it was like the funniest ending to a hardpoint I've ever seen was the Skyline ending for Vegas Falcons and the Miami Heretics. You gotta go watch it. One guy like blows himself up with a nade, another guy just dives into the water, somebody else just stands still, like puts his controller down and gets killed in the back. Like, they're just freaking out at the end of these maps. Just have to calm down because the skylines are very close. It looks like their skyline is good. Nothing else looks good though. So they got to build upon their skyline. That'll probably start to get vetoed. So focus a little bit more on protocol, because it seems like they have a lot of like AR players. One, focus on protocol if you can, because it looks like you have more natural ARs, but then also like figure out who's going to be the consistent second sub on this roster. They have to figure that out. But that's really all I have on Vegas at this point. Like, they just have a lot to learn. They got a late start. They definitely played a lot better than I thought that they would though off the rip, which is very good for the league, and obviously probably instills a little bit of confidence in the individual players. But calm down and figure out who's going to run your second SMG. The Miami Heretics, I love Rencor on this team. I think Metals back to the SMG is fantastic. Rencor coming into this roster puts Metals on a full-time SMG now. Rencor is the flex, and I think they played very good. I mean, they look good in the respawns. Real's the real deal. absolutely fried at like a kill record, I think, on the rewind HP. Their hard point looks better than it did last year. The S&D looks like it's up to par once again. Obviously, there's a heartbreaker at the end versus that Surge roster, but they look like they're going to be a top 8 team all year, man. We got a lot of teams that are looking pretty good after the first 2 weeks. I really like this team, though. I think they're going to impress people all year long, and they're going to cause some pretty massive upsets. And with the land lodge that they learned last year, this new roster, man, I'm telling y'all, don't sleep on Miami. Vamos, baby. I'm all on the train. Atlanta Faze. Okay, I was really worried about Atlanta. I mean, they made a ton of mistakes in their Toronto match. They look like shit. And then we get into that next match and they just get thrashed off the rip by the LA Thieves. I think Atlanta doesn't understand this game fully yet. Like, at least on the same level that you see LA Thieves or even Optic Texas, like a couple huge moments where they just like weren't pushing out the cuts fast enough or making like snappy decisions. And I was just mind blown because it's Atlanta Faze that we're talking about. Now they will learn as time goes on. They'll get better. They're a very good team, you know, some of the greatest of all time. And you saw them sort of evolving as the series went on versus the LA Thieves. They just got to find their confidence, right? But right now as it stands, they're sitting at 0-2, right? So you got to catch these wins ASAP. The hard point has to get better. It took Celium going absolutely buck wild in a massive like turn up for them at the end of that rewind to even push it to the game 5. So they have to clean it up. There's so many games where they have just like out talented people and made mistakes and clutched up in 1 HPs. You cannot play like that in this game. You cannot just play chaotic hardpoint, win your gunfights, and win in this game. You will get punished. You will get spawned out. This game makes sense. The spawns make sense. They're going to have to play sound Call of Duty and try to get these good setups. I saw a lot of situations. We didn't draw conclusions where they're like, we're just avoiding hallway on P1 on vault. Like you cannot do that, especially versus players. Call of Duty's evolved to this point. Everybody's good. Everybody knows what to do. You can't just get away with your gun skills. So they're going to have to be more disciplined and actually apply what they're doing in practice, because I know in practice they're going over these things. They have a great coach. They have great teammates. Like they know what they need to do, but they have to apply it in game and not try to be individual heroes. So something for Faze that worries me. Sometimes they drop strategy in these games and they're just gonna have to work on that, which I have no doubt in my mind that they will, and they'll figure it out. Cloud9 New York. Cloud9 New York, they're in LA and they were on like a higher ping, but man, did they not look good. I'm gonna give them a pass here because of the ping thing. As a competitor, I know how that can check you, how frustrating that can truly be. I do say I question them being in LA. Like, I don't think you should be in LA. If you're in the Call of Duty League, you should be in Texas. You have to be somewhere where you can get the best practice. Like a majority of our league is online. A lot of the points come from online. Like if you can be in Texas, you should be there. So I think they should work on a solve. I'm gonna give them a pass for now, but like I said, Mac looking like the best player after having a year off is a huge concern. I talked about in the last video, the dynamic between Attach and Sib really concerned me. They both play for kills, and so far Sib has not looked good. Once again, I'll preface it with like the ping is definitely an issue. As a competitor, I know how that could check you, but they have to figure it out. They can't keep making that excuse, but we'll give them a pass for now. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love being able to break down everything for you guys over the weekend. These are my thoughts on some of these teams. We'll see how everything shakes up after week 2. We got one more week and then we have a huge break. It's about a month. And then we're going to have like a minor tournament, which should be interesting. It's new and it'll be a lot of fun. We might have some new maps by then as well. Hasi, we'll see ya. But make sure you guys leave a like and support this video. Leave a like. See you guys in the next one. Peace.